Jodi, I have a question for you. So, what is the importance of, or how do you navigate, I guess, the negative news when you hear of maybe a family member, a friend, or even yourself is going through a tough, kind of a health scare?
I think there are probably, everyone is different, and there are different ways that people are going to approach it. Some people are going to say, oh, this is the time that you just gather in as family and you don't talk to other people and you keep it close and you navigate that journey together. What I found for me is when I was going through everything, and as I still go through challenges, I take a little bit of time to process things for myself internally, and then when I get to the point where I think that I've processed it enough that I can deal with it, or at least deal with the thoughts of it, I do choose to share things with other people because I feel like I get the additional support and help and prayers, and I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are trying to help me. And that's hugely important when you're going through something that is difficult, that is going to take all of your energy, that's going to literally take everything out of you. So to me, I feel like it is important to share, but of course you have to be comfortable with the things that you are sharing. And so you have to choose which things you're going to put out there publicly and what things that you're going to hold personal yourself. Early on in my brain tumor journey, we decided to share things pretty openly and publicly, partly because the initial diagnosis was so scary that we needed all the help we could get. We needed resources, we needed people to ask within their networks to say, who do you know that might be able to help with this? Are there any similar circumstances and situations? But then also we were calling on people to pray and to fast and to support, and not just support me, but also my family, who was in the middle of this huge crisis as well, even though their part in it was different than mine. So there are definitely different ways to talk about it and to process it, and you have to see what you're comfortable with sharing to know how you want the larger world to know it.
So what's your advice to someone that really has a challenge with not wanting to talk about it, right? Like keeping it in. Because I find that a lot of people do get concerned, or they don't know how to navigate it, so they tend to like withdraw. What's your advice for that, or what are your thoughts?
I think part of the reason for withdrawal is because you're dealing with all of these heavy emotions, and maybe you don't want the world to see what's going on. Maybe it just feels like it's too heavy. Maybe there's some facade that you don't want the rest of the world to see through. I think that's all very normal. I mean, that's the life we live, right? We all have a facade to some point in time, or we all have a facade to some extent, and it's hard sometimes to let people into the realities. But I really do think that it is beneficial when you can break through that and actually get to the point where you are willing to share. Now, what that means is you might have to go through the grieving process for yourself first to accept that the challenge that you're going through or that your family is going through is going to change your lives. And sometimes you have to really let go of the dreams and the goals that you had for yourself or your family so that you can then accept the journey that you're on. But I think that once you've done that, I truly believe that there are many, many benefits and blessings that occur when you are willing to open up and be willing to share. And if you're not feeling comfortable enough to share it with everyone, but you want the additional support, then choose someone almost as your spokesperson. Choose a best friend, choose a family member, a sister, a brother, or a parent that you can share things with that can then also share things on your behalf. Whether it's as an official spokesperson for the family, or if it's just saying, hey, this is too much for them to talk about, but you probably ought to know what's going on. I think it's good to let people in, not so that they know your secrets, but so they know how to help you and they know how they can support you.
And what about people like inside, right? So we kind of are talking about on the outside, letting the general public know. What about internally? How do we talk or share things with our spouses or our children or, our immediate home?
It can kind of get a little bit heavy because when you have a situation or a diagnosis that is very difficult where there might not be a great outcome, I think you have to be protective of the things that you say, both for yourself. You don't want to put your own head in a negative mindset because you need to stay as positive as possible. But at the same time, you also need to process and think through the different scenarios so that you can mentally be okay and deal with the things that you're going to have to deal with. And we've got a situation right now with my own family where I have a nephew that is just near and dear to my heart, who is a 16-year-old kid, and he's got stage 4 cancer, and he is in the hospital right now, truly fighting for his life. And to see how his family is navigating that and the conversations that are taking place, and that his family, for the most part, are staying very, very positive with themselves, with each other, as well as with the outside world. And I think the only conversations that maybe go to the hard places, the places that we don't want to think about, happen between his parents on their own. They don't really go there with other people. I think they need to protect themselves, but more importantly, they are protecting their son because they don't want certain things to take over the narrative. They want people to be as positive and helpful and hopeful and prayerful as possible to create the best outcome for Jared, and that is the narrative that then they have with their family and with others on the outside. But I have no doubt they have had difficult conversations with each other, and certainly my husband and I have had some very difficult conversations. Although truthfully, we never went to some of the places that were hardest. We never talked about the fact that I might not live through it until it was over. And when the biggest risk had passed, and I had survived the most difficult and trickiest procedures and surgeries, only when we knew I was going to live did both of us finally open up and express our fears to each other that we didn't know if that was actually going to be the outcome. And maybe that's because we just needed so desperately to have that hope that everything was going to be okay. But interestingly, we've talked about it a lot in the last several years, but going into it, we did not talk about the possibility that I might not live. Although everyone else did. We came to find out that the doctors, the surgeons, the neurosurgeons, the neighbors, the friends, the church members, the neighborhood people, everyone behind closed doors said, she's probably not going to make it. And maybe it's naivety, maybe it's blissful ignorance, maybe it's just the desire to stay hopeful and positive. We never had that conversation with each other. I know that my husband Tolan had to go there in his own mind because he had to process the fact that I could go into surgery one morning and not come out. So I know he had to go through those thoughts, but we did not ever have that conversation with each other until after I survived.
Is it okay to feel, I guess, down or negative when things like this happen? Like, is that actually okay to do, or are we supposed to only stay positive?
I think you have to go through those feelings and emotions. I think you have to give yourself time to mourn, time to grieve, time to be disappointed. I just think it's dangerous if you stay in that mindset too long, because your body follows your mind. What you think about, what you focus on, your body tends to go along with it. And so the more hopeful and the more positive you are, the better attitude you have, the happier you are, the more optimistic you are. It actually, there's science behind it that says it increases your likelihood of surviving. Even the worst scenario, even the worst kind of diagnosis, you are better off if you have a positive attitude and if you are happy and can still find joy. Those who tend to wallow in the misery of it and in the sadness of it don't have as positive outcomes. And there's science to show that. And I remember being in the hospital and seeing people who came in to the neuro ICU who were not as sick as I was, and they didn't make it out. I could see sometimes that you could almost recognize this look on their face, this look of despair, of hopelessness, of giving up. And so I think, yes, you absolutely need to go through the emotions. And if you don't, it's going to hit you harder at some point in time because you need to go through it. And it might just be a matter of timing. If you delay it and delay it and delay it, that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It just means you're putting it off and it might actually be building. So one thing that a good friend of mine said, she said, whenever I am going through something that's big and deep and heavy, I give myself time to go through it, to mourn, to be sad. And she said, but I always give myself a deadline or a date. Okay, if it's something big, you got 3 days. And then after that 3 days, I got to snap myself out of it. If it's something smaller, it might be a few hours. But I think that thought of allow your emotions to go there, because physiologically your body does go through certain things and you're going to be processing these things. And so if you allow yourself to have those moments feeling like you're down, where you break down and you're in tears, you're actually processing through some really important emotions and feelings. And in some ways that's the beginning of the dealing with it part. And so when you can go through that, and I don't want to say totally get it out of your system, because I think a lot of that can still be there, but if you at least go through the starting of processing it, then you can get yourself to a mentally healthier place so that you can be a little bit more positive because you've dealt with the negative yourself.